So in these next examples, we're going to see situations where they don't, where they're asking us to determine which, whether each triangle should be solved by beginning with law of sines or law of cosines, then solve the triangle, right? So, so we have to know just by looking at a triangle which law do we use, okay? And so let's take a look back. So there's two cases or two situations where we can use law of sines. One is where we're given two angles and a side, right? And that doesn't even have to be the opposite side, just could be any side. Because if you know two angles, what can we do? We can always find the third by doing 180 minus, right? Those two angles. And so if you're given two angles in any side in any triangle, you can use the law of sines, okay? The law of sines also works if you have two sides and one opposite angle, okay? So two sides and one opposite angle means that you can use law of sines, all right? So the obvious one is two angles and a side. And then the one that's going to be a little bit less distinguishable is two angles and an opposite side. And we'll talk about why it's less distinguishable here in a second. So law of cosines works if you know all three sides in a triangle, okay? So that's the most obvious one. If you know all three sides, it's law of cosines. If you're trying to find missing, if you're trying to solve the triangle or find any other missing parts. The other way to do it is if you have two sides in the included angle, right? But it has to be the included angle. It can't be the opposite angle, right? And so the part that's a little tricky is this right here, right? So law of sines you use with two sides and an angle. Law of cosines you can use with two sides and an angle. The difference is law of sines is opposite angle and law of cosines is the included angle, okay? All right. So that's when to use which, and I would definitely recommend writing this down in your notes and using it when we get to the test. All right, so let's run through these. So here I have all three sides. That's obvious, law of cosines, okay? So just put LOC, and then you're going to solve the triangle from there, okay? We'll come back and solve them. Here I have two angles, and right away, two angles pretty much is law of sines, but two angles and a side, I'm going to use law of sines, okay? So those are the obvious ones. Three sides, pretty obvious law of cosines. Two angles and a side, law of cosines. Or excuse me, law of sines when you have two angles and a side, sorry. All right, now here I have two sides and an angle, and here I have two sides and an angle, right? And I have the same two sides actually, A and B, A and B. So then which trig function do we use, or which trig law I should say, depends on which angle is given. So on number 5, we have an opposite pair of angles that's given, right? So because those are opposites with one another, that means I'm going to use law of sines, okay? Law of sines is for opposites. All right, and then this one, C is not the opposite of A nor B, and so C is included. So because this is included, that means we're going to do law of cosines, okay? So let me just put included, and here I'll put opposite. And it's opposite of A right here, right? Okay, all right, so that's when to use which, okay? Is just by looking at them and seeing what you're given, okay? Are you given, three sides, two sides? If you're given two sides, is it included angle or opposite angle? And then if you're given two angles and a side, then it's automatically law of sines. All right, now to work these out, for this one, I would have to pick an angle that I want to find, right? I could find A, B, or C. So let's see, let's find A. So I'm going to do 3 squared plus, I'm sorry, got to do the left side of the equation. So start with the opposite. So it'll be 4 squared equals, and then 3 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 times 3 times 6 times cosine of A. Alright, so now I'm going to combine these together. So 3 squared is 9 plus 6 squared is 36, so it'll be 47. 2 times 3 times 6 is negative 36, because that negative in front. Alright, and then 4 squared is 16. So now I'm going to subtract 47 from both sides. Right, because remember, these are not like terms. So those cancel out, so I get negative 31 equals negative 36 cosine A. Then we divide both sides by 36. Let me erase this other stuff. So we get cosine A equals negative divided by negative is a positive, so it'll be positive 31 over 36. Now I'm going to take the cosine inverse of both sides. And so we get A equals whatever the cosine of 31 over 36 is. Alright, so cosine inverse of 31 over 36 is approximately 30.55, so it'll be 31. Alright, but we could store the other values x if we want to. Alright, so now that we have 31 is angle A, now we can find whatever else we want. We could do the same thing and go through that process again to find angle C or angle B, or I can use law of sines now, because now I have an opposite relationship, right? So I can say sine of 31 degrees over 4 equals sine of B over 3. Then we cross multiply, so we get 3 sine 31 equals 4 sine B. Divide both sides by 4 sine B, or excuse me, by 4. And we get sine B equals 3 sine 31 over 4. Okay, then we can just take sine inverse of both sides. And so we get B is approximately, and it's approximately 22.7. And so that'll make it 23. Alright, so 23 degrees goes here. And now you can easily find C by subtracting from 180. So 180 minus 31 minus 23 equals alright, so 126. Alright, so now we have everything. We solve this triangle. Okay, so we use law of cosines first, then we use law of sines. And after you find whatever the first thing is, once you have 4 parts, you can usually choose between law of sines or law of cosines. Alright. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at that and not do the other ones just because, yeah, just for time's sake. But if you want me to, I can do these on the board in class, so let me know. And if enough people want to, maybe I can just do a supplementary video on these. But the main thing is figuring out which one to do first, right? Because once you get there, then it's just just kind of second nature, hopefully. And then remember, after you find the first missing part, you'll have 4 parts, or maybe even 5 if you found a missing angle. And then you have a lot of choices. You can use whatever one you want after that first initial step. Okay. All right. So bring questions to class. Let me know if you need anything, and yeah, we're getting pretty far. We're actually getting pretty close to finishing chapter 12. So you guys are doing great. Keep up the good work.